Good afternoon. My name is Natalia Gayou. So thank you so much. Actually, you pronounced my last name correctly. And I am an outbreak epidemiologist at CDPHE. We'll be talking about norovirus and other gastrointestinal illnesses in correctional settings. We will be going through the most common gastrointestinal illnesses that occur in congregate living settings, discuss how to prevent these illnesses, and review what to do in outbreak situations. I did leave plenty of time for questions since no two outbreaks look the same, and we may have certain scenarios that we want to talk through. So please keep that in mind that we will have plenty of time to talk through that. So to start these conversations, let's define what an outbreak is. Two ways of defining an outbreak are the occurrence of more illness than expected in a given area or among a specific group of people over a period of time. For this definition, we rely on having a baseline of illness in a specific group and time. Illness baselines can be determined by keeping an illness log throughout the year that you can then look back on to determine if there is an increase or not in a specific illness or symptomology within a group of people. Another definition is similar illness in two or more people after consuming the same food item. In this situation, we will ensure that the food item is the only common food item eaten amongst ill individuals. So basically what we look for is a common exposure. Now, within outbreaks, we have different types of outbreaks based on how the illness is spread. Person to person, which is the most common, is when individuals infect one another in a sort of ripple effect. One way to know that an outbreak is person to person is when we see just one or two cases initially, and then it grows exponentially because people continue to expose others. Point source, however, is when individuals are exposed to the same source of illness over a brief period of time, such as a picnic or other event. In this situation, there would be a large number of cases identified initially, and then it'll peak and then fizzle out. All of these definitions can be applied to the two most GI illnesses in correctional settings to include norovirus, salmonella, shigella, hepatitis A, B serious, or C perfringens. We won't go into too much detail on salmonella, shigella, or hepatitis A today. We will focus more on norovirus and toxins as they are the most common. So starting with toxins, C. perfringens, or C. perf, as some people who have difficulty pronouncing this, such as myself, may call it, tends to implicate foods such as stews, beans, cooked meats, and other large quantity foods prepared in larger settings. Beans have been the most common food in the most recent outbreaks. The incubation, or time it takes between being exposed to the toxin to then becoming ill, is between 6 to 24 hours. So it's a pretty quick turnaround. Symptoms that are usually experienced are nausea, abdominal cramps, and diarrhea, which last between 12 and 24 hours. Another toxin is the vomiting B serious. The incubation period for this toxin is even shorter than C. perf, with the range being 1 to 6 hours, and symptoms including nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea or abdominal cramps, which typically last less than 24 hours. Foods that are typically implicated with this toxin are rice dishes, casseroles, salads, sauces, cream, and more. When individuals complain of food poisoning with vomiting right after eating the meal in question, this is typically the toxin that comes back first. B serious can also be a diarrheal toxin. With an incubation period of 6 to 24 hours, people typically have about 24 hours of watery diarrhea, cramps, and nausea. Implicated foods can be soups, sauces, pasta, rice, and more. It is important to note that with toxins, these are not spread person to person. They're typically foodborne. And all of these toxins can also be found in any improperly handled food in terms of how they are heated or cooled. So a couple of ways to prevent these toxins are, as I just mentioned, to properly handle and store food. That includes cooking food to a safe internal temperature, keeping cooked food at 140 degrees or higher, or cooling food to 40 degrees Fahrenheit or colder if not serving right away, or if we're storing food within 2 hours of heating it. It's important to note that leftovers should be reheated to 165 degrees Fahrenheit or colder. We know that it can be really challenging to cool large batches of food for institutional settings, but we've heard of facilities finding success with using more shallow containers or isolants to, again, help with that cooling process within those 2 hours of cooking that food. So now that we've discussed toxins, we can talk about the biggest culprit of GI illness of them all, which is norovirus. Norovirus has an incubation period of 12 to 48 hours. So people don't get sick as quickly compared to the toxins that we just discussed. Typically, individuals will have vomiting, diarrhea, a low-grade fever, and nausea, which usually lasts between 1 to 3 days. Unlike the toxins, norovirus is spread primarily person to person, but can also spread via food or contact. Norovirus is highly infectious and can last in the environment for weeks on surfaces. Unfortunately, it can also aerosolize when individuals vomit, further increasing the surface area of where the virus can land and risking getting in food if the individual that was sick was cooking or preparing food. It has a very low infectious dose, meaning it takes a really small amount of the virus to cause illness, and unfortunately, it is not affected by common disinfectants. With outbreak type and disease basics background in mind, we can discuss the different kinds of norovirus outbreaks now. So in simple terms, there are suspected etiology of norovirus and confirmed etiology of norovirus. So both of these are still confirmed outbreaks. The difference is that the etiology or the cause of illness is either confirmed by testing or suspected due to the signs and symptoms being experienced. So far we've gone through a lot of different information and a couple of different diseases in a really short period of time. Hopefully this table helps to paint a clearer picture of the differences between the diseases we've talked about. It can be a handy tool to have around if or when you find yourself in an outbreak situation. As we can see, especially with the symptom duration and incubation period, there are some pretty stark differences. And because we know that we can't always test ill individuals or food, it's important that we have these differences between the different illnesses in mind to determine what we might be feeling. So making sure you're able to gather symptom information on as many ill individuals as possible within the facility, including how long symptoms lasted, will help you get a better idea of the culprit at hand to determine the next steps in mitigating the outbreak. So here we have some of the most important ways to prevent an outbreak. Specifically, I'd like to call out hand washing, cooking food thoroughly, and ensuring that food is being handled at the proper temperature, as already discussed. But also it's important that ill individuals not participate in group activities, handle food, visit, or come to work while ill. We just went over how norovirus specifically can spread to large surface areas and possibly affect a large number of people. So the less often you have large numbers of people together, the better. And as mentioned previously, norovirus can last on surfaces for many weeks. So it's important to properly and promptly clean up vomit and diarrheal accidents, as well as routinely clean and disinfect. Which leads us now to how to properly clean and disinfect. When performing these greatly necessary steps, it is important to use bleach or other products approved by the EPA for norovirus. I call it norovirus specifically because, again, it is a very hardy virus that is very difficult to kill. So if you're able to kill norovirus, it increases the likelihood you are killing off any other agents. The easiest way to ensure it is approved for norovirus is to check the label on the product and follow the directions for contact time, which is the time you leave it wet on the surface before either letting it air dry or wipe away. Always make sure you follow the label directions as to how, and that's just to make sure that you are using the product effectively to make sure that that product will actually do what it's supposed to do. Dirty linen should be laundered in hot water, and hands should be washed using soap and water. Unfortunately, hand sanitizers are not effective against norovirus, so soap and water are pivotal. That is not to say we shouldn't use hand sanitizers. The use of hand sanitizers helps with a lot of other diseases, but when possibly dealing with norovirus, we want to make sure to use soap and water. Even with using these tools, you may need more techniques and processes to help mitigate the outbreak. In an outbreak situation, you want to try to separate those who are sick from those who are not sick. Those who are sick should be excluded from being around other people until at least 48 hours have passed since their symptoms have resolved. And you want to keep individuals who are sick together and those who are not ill away from those who are. You want to postpone group activities. As already mentioned, you want to limit the chances of exposing others and possibly having a vomiting accident with large groups of people around. And that could just be the recipe for disaster. If you have staff that float from unit to unit throughout the day, make sure they are not going from areas where people are sick to then following up with people who are not ill, because that can further the potential of exposure. If it's not possible to halt that kind of floating situation, have staff work with the healthy individuals first and then float to those who are not ill, to who are ill. When increasing cleaning of high-touch surfaces and caring for those who are ill, as well as when cleaning up accidents, make sure staff is wearing the proper PPE. This should include gowns and gloves as well as masks when dealing with vomit. And please dispose of any food that ill individuals may have made. As discussed earlier, when comparing the different illnesses, we mentioned how important it was to know what you're dealing with. So beyond looking at symptoms and duration, it can be a game changer to be able to actually test sick individuals. This will help confirm you're using the appropriate products and mitigation processes, and is going to help make sure that the proper medical treatment is being given, if and when appropriate. If you are wanting to conduct some testing, CDPHE can help coordinate testing kits and logistics of gathering specimens and sending them to the lab. At times, we can also pay for that stool testing depending on the situation. You'll just want to reach out to CDPHE Epidemiologist to start that process. Our group email will be included at the end of the slide deck, as well as on the next slide. And on the note of reaching out to CDPHE, it's a great time to refresh everyone on that all outbreaks, regardless of cause and regardless of whether you know the cause, are immediately reportable to public health. These are reportable so that we can help you figure out what the cause of the issue is, make sure we can try to prevent anyone else from getting sick, and also so we can gather data on getting a better idea of what's going around in our communities. You can either email or call your local public health authority or CDPHE. If you are a state correctional facility, you can report directly to CDPHE. You can use either the below email address for reporting GI outbreaks or the phone number as well for any and all other outbreaks as well. When you call that number, you will be referred to the appropriate team for whatever illness you are dealing with. Once you reach out, it will be most helpful to have ready to share the location of the outbreak, how many people are sick, what their symptoms are, the date the first person became ill, a summary of the steps taken so far, and whether you think it may be person to person or foodborne. We can help determine that mode of transmission as well once we gather all the information and possibly ask a couple of follow-up questions as well. This information is used for our reporting purposes, but can also help determine any next steps that we may not have started yet. We do at times ask for additional information not included in this list just to help understand the whole picture of the situation, and again, just try to think through the different scenarios that may be going on within the facility to help in thinking. Once 2 incubation periods have passed without any additional cases, we can close out an outbreak. As a refresher, different illnesses typically have different incubation periods, which points to the importance, again, of testing and gathering full information on timing and symptoms. If no testing is completed, we use that information, the information being symptoms and how long they lasted, to determine the incubation period we will be using for outbreak closure. Once you've reached those 2 incubation periods, you will make sure to get in touch with public health, and from there, public health uses the information we provided to complete outbreak summary report and an epi curve. And with that, that is the concise summary of the life cycle of an outbreak, as well as an overview of the many different diseases seen in correctional settings. So thank you for that time. And as I mentioned, I gave plenty of time so we could go through any scenarios and see if we have questions.
Thank you, Natalie. It does look like we have a question in the chat. Question is UVC lot effective against the norovirus?
I actually don't have the answer to that question right off the top of my head, unfortunately, but I am writing that down so that I can get an answer for you. Andrea, will I be able to email you so we can get that answer out?
Okay, yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
All right, does anybody have any questions before we end today's training? All righty. Well, thank you everyone for taking the time to join us today, and I hope y'all have a good day. Thank you so much.